Jesus, this is a long video.
Every year, I spend far too much time online digging through the world of street art, graffiti, and public art in general. And at the end of the year, I like to package this all up into a neat little video, showcasing what I believe to be some of the most interesting work that may or may not fall under the umbrella of street art. I use this as a chance for me to reflect on the scene, to shine a light on artists or projects that have stood out for various reasons, and to offer some general insight into this world of urban creativity. This year I've decided to go all in, and I have a feeling that this video is going to end up being the longest video I've ever made. So buckle up, and hopefully it's still a somewhat enjoyable watch. If you're new to the channel or street art isn't really your thing, don't worry, I'm going to do my best to break this down bit by bit. This is some pretty niche content in general. Ultimately, I want to just showcase great work and use this as a chance to peel back some of the layers of the culture. If you do enjoy this video and you want to support the channel, I have included a buy me a coffee link in the description. I do like caffeine. Even just liking the video, subscribing to the channel, sharing it, all that stuff helps more than you could possibly think. And totally shameless plug before we get into it, I do sort of do this for a living. So if you are in the process of developing panel discussions, curation, if you are looking for a guest speaker on this subject matter, then please feel free to get in touch. My rates are extremely reasonable. That is enough of that. Let's get into it. As always, I have my thoughts and opinions on street art culture and where I think it stands at the moment. Rather than bombarding you with it all at once, I'm going to drip feed this out over the course of the video as we look at some incredible work together. Like I said, I am a massive geek for this. I am always on the lookout for new artists, and I thought a good way to ease us into this video would just be to showcase some artists that have come onto my radar for various reasons in 2024. A lot of the stuff I've been drawn to is quite dark. If weird and dark isn't your thing, I do have lots of pretty coming up later, so don't worry. Let's start with the Italian artist Nicola Alessandrini. His work draws heavily on regional folklore, weaving fables of witches and werewolves into murals that reflect and preserve local storytelling traditions. It's dark, it's intense, and I absolutely love it. I'm also captivated by the brutal aesthetic of Silverforms and Monosotos, who I believe are Greek. Their work seems perfectly suited to abandoned spaces, these decaying, empty structures, providing the ideal canvas for art that, let's be honest, wouldn't quite feel right in the middle of a city centre. Abstraction remains a big love of mine. Two standout discoveries for me this year were Simek and Damian Mauro. I also had the absolute pleasure of spending some time with the Polish-Portuguese duo Mots at the Wool Festival in Portugal. Their surreal, abstract worlds are really fascinating for me. I find what they're doing to be so original, and they are firm favourites of mine at the moment. Another artist who stood out for me this year was Marat Morik from Russia. There's just something about his murals. It's like a blend of expressionism, realism, cubism, figuration, abstraction. Like, it's all in there, and it feels deeply rooted into the lineage of art history. I actually find this really hard to verbalize what it is that I really love about this one, but it exudes something that is so completely uniquely Russian, if that makes sense. In terms of visual identity, he feels really unique. On a similarly unconventional note, Mick Burson's Freight Train Animal series has just been an absolute joy to follow. Brightens up my day every time I see one of them. Equally captivating are the completely original works of Argentinian artist Thomas Facio. So distinct, imaginative, and again, it feels like a completely unique visual language. Finally is the Belgian artist Iota, who's created some absolute gems this year. There's a bold fluidity to her pieces that just completely catch my eye. I was particularly drawn to her work for Palestinian relief. Later on, we're going to get into some of the bigger, shinier, sexier street art projects from 2024. But before we embark on that journey, I just want to get our hands a little dirtier and get messy in the beautiful world of graffiti. Look, full disclosure, I'm not exactly what you would call a head in graph. I never claimed to be in it. I'm not out climbing fences, running away from security, and I am aware that discussing graffiti from the sidelines has a way of ruffling feathers. That said, here are my completely unqualified, but hopefully enthusiastic 2 cents. When I did this video last year at the end of 2023, a series of graffiti takeovers had just happened in Miami, and this ended up sort of teeing up a series in LA in 2024.
You're looking at this video for the first time and only on NBC4. People in action here spraying the graffiti towers in downtown LA. It is a crime, a violation of city law, but some call it art.
The work itself became this really interesting focal point for discussion. If you happen to miss this, it was basically just a series, really impressive number of writers had descended onto these abandoned buildings in the city centers, just completely took them over and caused this massive media frenzy. Suddenly graffiti wasn't just this thing that existed in the streets, it was the epicenter of public discourse. What really makes this interesting isn't just the paint itself, it's the way that graffiti becomes a vehicle to call out issues around disastrous handling of public housing. Gentrification opens up a series of questions on who owns and controls public space.
The city of Los Angeles has now taken responsibility for it, and they're funding so much money to protect the buildings and paint them and all that, where that money could be used anywhere else.
At a time when public art just in general seems to be about bigger budgets, shinier productions, number of Instagram likes, this was like the antithesis of that. It might not be for everybody, but it's impossible to ignore, and that for me is kind of the point of it all. While many people might find footage of actions like this unsettling, you could also interpret it as a massive middle finger to the Orwellian levels of surveillance from driverless cars watching over neighborhoods. It forces us to think about how the fundamental freedoms of a liberal democratic society are expressed and maintained. For me, it's less about the technical skill or aesthetic qualities of an individual piece. It's more about how graffiti as a collective makes us think about the freedoms that we often take for granted. It's a loud, messy, unapologetic reminder that democracy isn't a given, it's something that you have to continuously fight for. In that same spirit, let's take a look at some street art projects that happened outside of the world of institutional or corporate funding, where things get a little scrappy. Like I said, we're gonna go into this today. So a lot of what gets called street art today isn't actually street art, it just refers to a mural. And while murals, like a lot of the incredible ones that I'm showing you in this video, can actually be qualified as independent public art, most aren't. If this is confusing, I get it. I'm gonna break down what exactly I'm trying to say here. Let's take Paul Insect's Animal series that happened in London this year and compare it to this absolute knockout mural by Honor. Technically, both are murals. Both are amazing in their own right. But comparing them is like comparing apples and oranges. They're completely different, but for most people, they would just happily call this street art. So let's keep unpacking this. To the best of my knowledge, I believe that Paul Insect's work here would have been created outside of the bureaucracy that tends to come with the formalized muralism that we see now as part of street art festivals. I have a feeling that for Paul Insect's project, he didn't have to fill out a risk assessment. It's just a guy, an idea, and a bit of paint. This autonomous act of an individual exemplifies everything that I believed street art in its purest to convey. This is kind of like a half-cooked thought, but I'd be really interested to know your thoughts on it. This blurring of everything into street art is contributing in some way or another to street art feeling like it's ultimately losing its edge. Let me know what you think about that. Jumping back into murals, contemporary muralism doesn't just happen. On the whole, murals require organization, funding, permissions. There's a whole process behind bringing them to life. This often comes with expectations around the function of this mural. That could be the impact that it has on the physical environment, the longevity of the mural, its role within a larger campaign, and all this comes with expectations around KPIs and return of investment. It's public art with a spreadsheet and data points. In festival environments, the value of big sanctioned murals is a lot easier to measure. They're tangible, they're quantifiable, and they're much easier to sell when applying for funding or convincing stakeholders. Organic human scale works like stickers, paste-ups, stencils, or certain types of mural, they don't fit into this framework. They're less predictable, harder to package, but that's precisely why they're important. And here's why this matters. When Bianco Shock transformed part of an incomplete road track into a Mario Kart starting line, or the French artist Oak Oak completely reimagined an abandoned space with just a few letters, the way those pieces are received is fundamentally different. Most people don't walk past a 5-story mural and think, I could do that. But when they see something clever or something small, something a little bit more DIY, they'll feel a different kind of inspiration. Like maybe they could contribute something as well. The spirit of participation should be at the heart of every single street art festival. It's participation that separates inclusion from imposition. Street art at its absolute best invites people to engage, not observe from a distance. Which brings me on to probably the biggest project of the year, the one that stayed the truest to what I believe street art's ethos to be. And yes, it came from none other than
Banksy has unveiled his 9th animal artwork in as many days.
As summer was winding down, or in the UK, let's be realistic, it was just getting started, Banksy decided to shock the residents of London by dropping new street pieces every day for 9 consecutive days. Like a pre-Christmas mini advent calendar, but instead of opening up chocolates, you get to look at some pelicans on a fish shop. You can say what you want about Banksy, you can say what you've thought about this. I loved it. I loved it for being exactly what it was. The hype around Banksy continues to just be bananas. After the first couple of pieces, every single journalist, blogger, social media commentator switched into detective mode. Theories were flying left and right about the subliminal messaging behind the work. Codes were being deciphered, and honestly, watching it was exhausting. It got to the point that it was so bad, Banksy had to tell everyone to just chill the fuck out and to just enjoy the work for what it was. And honestly, that moment felt like a perfect mirror of where we are as a society right now. Everything these days is overanalyzed to death. There's TikTok think pieces on absolutely everything. It was just nice to see Banksy back doing what he loves, having a bit of fun with it, reminding people to just stop taking everything so serious. And it feels like he's asking the impossible because everything around us is so serious right now. It's almost like we've actually just forgotten how to enjoy something for what it is. Like, let's look at the monkeys on Brick Lane. Like, how has he done this? Nobody had hit that spot. Like, I would imagine him and his team have had to turn up with a Luton van. They've hopped on top of the van. They've got ladders and stencils out, and they've managed to create this piece. Like, on Brick Lane, one of the hottest, most monitored spots that you could find in the city. Like, fair play to the guy. Here he is 20 years later, still doing his thing, having fun with it, keeping everyone on their toes. Like, love him or hate him, that's got to be worth something. There was one independent public art project that really caught my eye that I think flew under the radar for most people. So, like, now's the time, here's the place, let's talk about it. The project came from Downey, who is one of street art's most conceptually brilliant figures. If you're not familiar with him, he is probably your favorite street artist's favorite street artist, though I'm not even sure how he'd feel about that term. He's the guy that gave us the Melania Trump statue. He's dyed poodles in urban spaces along countless other projects over a long period of time. So this year he unveiled a project that was actually 6 years in the making, and I just don't think it got the attention that it deserved. The project was set in the Valley of Names in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. The place looks like this bizarre intersection of worlds. It's part US-Mexico borderland, part military testing ground, and part Native American tribal land. The Yuma Proving Ground, which spans a massive 4,000 square kilometers of desert, is a spot where, for the right price, you can do just about anything, including testing military gear or spacecraft equipment. I'm not quite sure the origin of this, but visitors to the area have a tradition of using the native red rock to spell out their names and names of loved ones on the desert floor. So Brad, being Brad, collected over 11 tons of this native red rock, and I assume with some help, used the red rock to create this massive drone survival guide detailing different types of aerial artillery tested in the area. The project was technically completed back in 2018, but Google Maps only now updated their images from the site. So in 2024, the installation was finally complete. A giant rock installation immortalized in Google Earth. Brilliant. One of my personal highlights this year was curating a series of panel talks for HK Walls in Hong Kong, a city where street art and graffiti culture is still relatively new, but there was one panel in particular with a Chinese muralist called Nut. He was breaking down the harsh realities of creating murals in a heavily controlled government environment and how muralism is largely co-opted as a tool for propaganda by the state.
Especially in China in general, the mural thing, it's especially mostly like forcing the artist to deliver, especially like a government news concept, stuff like that. More like little
very
bit like
restricted.
propaganda.
It's just like equal parts mind-blowing as it was fascinating. Speaking of propaganda, let's dive into the precarious world of political street art in 2024 with this curious little stencil of President-in-waiting Trump giving the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky the boot. After Trump was confirmed as the President-in-waiting, I will spare you my commentary on all that. This image began making the rounds online, particularly on Russian media with headlines attached to it like "London responds to Trump victory." The catch, it was completely fake. Anyone from London could tell you that this was an image of the Barbican Centre. Ironically, Barbican Centre is famed for its Soviet brutalist architecture. But nowhere on local forums was there any discourse about the piece to be found. Given the status of this particular site, no dialogue on a stencil like this would be inconceivable. Murals have long been used as a tool for propaganda, but now even stencils, real or imaginary, are being weaponized in some way. I think it would be fair to call 2024 on the whole as politically turbulent. More than 60 countries this year, including the US, the UK, Russia, France, India, Mexico, held national elections. Meanwhile, governments were being overthrown left and right, wars continue to multiply, and the global atmosphere seems a little tense. The streets, as always, reflected this tension.
Israel is intentionally committing genocide in Gaza. That's according to a report from Amnesty International.
Take Israel's ongoing campaign in Gaza, which this year extended into Lebanon and now Syria. Being faced with what we can only in good conscience call genocide, artists have taken to the street. Institutions still find it somehow impossible to platform these voices. It feels like we're continuously being gaslit. So where those traditional venues falter, the streets remain a safe space for direct action. Jordanian artist Dalal Mitwali's piece "There Is No More Beach" on Paris's famous Le Mur wall subverted the iconic May 1968 slogan "Under the paving stones the beach" to highlight the devastating destruction in Gaza. It was simple, sharp, and of course heartbreaking. And then there was Brian Bay-Young's mural for Canada's Mural Festival that completely caught me off guard. It directly referenced the relentless bombings in Gaza, and its inclusion in a festival that tends to play it quite safe felt really, great. And it goes without saying the ongoing work and efforts of Tel Aviv-based artist Adam Yekutieli, aka No Hope. In the conversation of politically charged artwork, few things carry as much weight as work being created by those with the lived experience of that situation, such as this work by Eslam Mohammed in Gaza. Syria is also an example I always go back to. With Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country under pressure from rebel groups, this year marked an incredible, almost surreal moment of significance for the Syrian people. But it's important to remember that politically charged and often deeply poetic graffiti has been a constant thread since the start of the 2011 uprising in Syria. The context surrounding this situation makes some of the graffiti that's come out of Syria in 2024 some of the most powerful I've ever seen in my life. Meanwhile, over in the US, there's a different kind of revolution brewing, one that's equally shocking as it is surreal. 4 years of a billionaire-stacked Trump presidency ahead of us. The future of the US and subsequently the rest of us feels more unpredictable than ever. At this point, it's kind of hard to tell if we're witnessing a cultural awakening or the slow unraveling of Western liberal democracy. Honestly, your guess is as good as mine on that one, but whatever way we're headed, the streets will be the first place to know. Look, this is an obscenely long video, but if you're still with me, let's just keep going. In thinking about how muralism or public art in general can reflect the ideological structures of the state that it's created in, it's a pretty interesting way to view it. Take, for example, Nutt's experience with the Chinese government, where certain colors or symbols are encouraged to reinforce state ideology. But compare that with how muralism is turned into a vehicle for capitalism in the West, where the messaging and the function is still highly controlled, but in a different way. Of course, these are two pretty extreme ends and there's a lot of nuance within the spectrum, but it does make you wonder how murals can be used to push narratives. Let's dive into some examples where murals have been used this year as a vehicle for bigger conversations. One such project is Street Art for Mankind, which continued its partnership with the UN's environmental program to drop a series of powerful murals. Each one aligned with a theme, like this one by the Italian artist Milo in central Manhattan, which contributed to the UN UN's global effort to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss by 2030. Then there's the Spanish artist Doc, who with Street Art for Mankind partnered with Gotham Whale to create this beauty focusing on ocean restoration and whale conservation in the Hudson River. I didn't even know there was such a thing as whale conservation in the Hudson. And a reflective and considered Guido van Helten made a return to the scene this year. I'm a big fan of Guido, and Guido is a big fan of silo projects. Like, nobody loves a silo project as much as Guido. This year he collaborated with the Southern Adriatic Seaport, creating murals on silos based off of interviews and conversations with local residents and fishermen, and I think it looks like it was his own imagery as well. His work is always really considered, and this was absolutely no exception. Spanish artist Jorge Rodriguez Garrada's Opening Horizons was another standout this year. A massive land art piece that emphasized the importance of accessible natural spaces is part of a larger call to action in Spain, advocating for equal access to the outdoors. And as always, let's not forget Saipe's Beyond Walls project, which made its way to the pyramids in Giza this year. This marked 5 years of spreading messages of global unity through his massive human chain murals.
You give me a different perspective to addiction, because I always saw it as something you could never get out of.
I've also been keeping an eye on the UK artists Ilo and Seka, who have been interviewing people about addiction and exploring the subject through their art. The project looks like it's going to culminate with a documentary and a mural. I think it's a great example of how deeply thoughtful subject matter can really amplify the power of a project, which brings me on to a bigger question. When thinking about these deep, thoughtful conversations in art, how do we effectively communicate this to an audience that is already overwhelmed with visual stimulation? For projects like festivals, maybe the strength of an individual mural matters less than the collective vision and identity of the project as a whole. Like, it's not just about an individual piece, it's about the bigger picture of what that project is trying to do. I've spent quite a lot of time talking about some of the issues that I see around contemporary muralism, and I think it's important for me to highlight that this is based off a desire to see a broader support for diverse mediums. And it's also just a concern about the role that murals play in distracting us from the bigger picture conversation around what's happening to our public environment. But I should say, on the whole, murals are great. I talk about artists like Pat Perry, Elisa Capdevila, Fred Battle, Matthew Pommier, Milu Korish, Joffrey Oliveira, Sebas Velasco, year on year for a reason. Russian artist Shozy is doing some mind-bending stuff at the moment. Polish artist Nezpoon really stands out year on year, and I'm really enjoying watching the Scottish artist KMG get a foothold in the scene. When you start to look at some of these bigger names, the lines between street art and institutional art become increasingly blurred. Vils is still rooted in street art, but he's also deeply involved in large-scale commissioned work. Felipe Pantone has created his own little universe, effortlessly hopping between massive murals and sleek design-focused commissions. Okuda's Silo project this year, like, genuinely phenomenal. Then there's this pressure-washed piece on the side of a dam in Urashino, Japan. Visually, that's going to be one of the strongest pieces of public art in 2024. And let's talk about Spy's light installation in Saudi Arabia. Still massively connected to his street roots, but just operating on a completely institutional level to create some of the most visually captivating projects anywhere in the world. This takes us further into the world of high-end institutional art. Like, I don't even care. I loved Ivan Argotti's giant pigeon in Manhattan. It's just brilliant for so many reasons. And Ibrahim Mahama's purple hibiscus wrapping the entire facade of the Barbican Center was a thing of beauty and cultural significance. And then there's Andres Reisinger's Takeover series, which hit Jeddah in Saudi Arabia with these walls of flowing pink fabric. And finally, Ingela Erman's first came the ocean sculpture, which recreated a 250 million year old reptile made of fallen fungus-infected trees from the Alps. It's a piece that connected the dots between time, nature, and history. I started writing this video asking myself the question, is street art dead in 2024? And then I realized that was a really stupid question. Of course it's not. But honestly, I'm not even sure if how much of what I've talked about here today qualifies as street art. I'm not even sure I understand what street art is anymore. Maybe that doesn't matter. What matters more to me is understanding the importance of how we communicate in public spaces, how we decode the messages we're constantly surrounded by. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's subtle, but the public environment is constantly talking to us. Art isn't and never will be confined to galleries or museums. Art isn't just for the elite or for those that can afford ticket entry entry to a fancy museum. The more we recognize this, the more likely we are to take ownership of these spaces, not just as passive observers, but as active participants. Public spaces where ideas are exchanged, where dissent can happen, where we come together to decide how we're going to shape the world around us. And street art and graffiti are the gasoline on the fire of that conversation. These ideas all lie at the heart of a healthy, thriving, liberal democracy. Fair play to you if you've made it this far. Probably won't do this again, but I really hope you've taken something away from this. Really, I do. I'll be back at some point in the new year. Until then, look after yourself, look out for each other, and most importantly, thank you for watching.